Oh dear.
Wow.
I didn't know we had Batman in the chat today. Hello, Batman. I'm aware of your sexuality now, and didn't think I would be.
Jeff's sexuality is Batman.
Mr. John Quick. Can
Hello,
you please...
hello.
There we go. Nailed it. Ron, can you put your video on, or are you not down for that today?
Where is it?
I don't know, sir.
I see a video crossed out here. Where's?
Oh, yes.
Click on that video that's crossed out, and that should turn it on.
Yep.
John, is that a skeleton with a plague doctor mask in the background?
Yes, it is.
That's awesome.
I bought the plague mask. My wife brought the skeleton home for me.
You see it
Excellent.
yet?
Yeah.
We can see you.
Hey, Ron, how you doing?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Christmas.
Ron,
Yeah, he's in Wonderland.
that's festive there. It is.
Yes, we are very festive in Tennessee down here.
Now, a little odd to ask this question considering what we're talking about, but is there anything nobody wants to talk? That's weird. Sorry, backtrack. Is there anything that you guys do not want to talk about? Is there any subject that I should note?
Can we avoid politics if possible?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about Christians and politics, Todd.
Oh. Okay, well, I was going to keep this civil, but if you want to go there.
Brennan, how about you start off with the first question? I'll do the intro because it's a little bit longer than normal.
What's the first? The first question is not applicable. What's the first question?
Well, I had one that I thought worked, which is, what is
How
your
about you start off? How about you start off then?
Okay. All right. Is everyone ready?
Mhm.
I'm so happy to be here. Okay, bye.
Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Ghana, and all other major platforms, which will include YouTube. There are 2 episodes left in season 1 after this. I'm sorry, guys. My writing is all jumbled together. Oh, God. I should have
Hey
double
Pat,
spaced.
let me interrupt you real quick. Before we kind of jump into everything, we wanted to just kind of throw at you guys. We kind of did in the chat, but we're very down to just kind of let the 4 of you pretty much run this thing. You know, keep it like basically a conversation between the 4 of you. If Pat or I see a place to jump in and ask, a follow-up question based on something interesting that comes up, we'll take it. But for the most part, I mean,
We're just
Pat,
here.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Jump in if you disagree, but I mean, it's your show, I think.
Excellent.
Okay.
Works for
I'm
me.
gonna start that intro over because I butchered it. Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on Apple app. I'm so sorry.
Please put this in the bloopers at the end.
Okay.
Right.
Take 3. Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Ghana, and all other major platforms, which will include YouTube. There are 2 episodes left in season 1. Season 2 launches January 18th, 2021. Along with that will be a website as well as a YouTube channel where you can watch the video versions of season 1, most of season 1's episodes, along with every season after that. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, and alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello.
And tonight we're doing something a little bit different, a round table titled Faith and Horror. We will get into the reason why pretty quickly. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce who we are joined by, Mr. Ronald Kelly. Say hi, Ron.
Howdy, y'all.
And this was actually Ron's idea to do this episode. I thought it was great, so I said, well, yeah, let's do it. And I think he was the one that suggested the next guest, which is John Quick.
Hello, hello.
Followed by Miss Mercedes M. Yardley.
Hi, nice to see you guys.
Hey. And Todd Keisling.
Hi.
So, hi, Todd. First question.
Hi, guys.
No one wants to say hi, Todd. Okay, rude.
Hi, Todd. Sorry, my kid has already shown up. I usually give him at least 15 minutes before that happens. Go with that.
So we will let's start with the first question. Whoever wants to jump in first, go for it. But I don't know how to word this any better than what is your religious belief? So we'll start with that just to give a little background. Mercedes.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm super distracted by my family. Hello, we're all in quarantine and we all live right here in this room pretty much. So I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, which is most people know as Mormons. Mormons is kind of like, you can call us a Mormon, but it's like calling a woman walking down the street a chick. You can do it, but it's not right. And so I grew up, we're Christian. We believe in Jesus Christ. We go to church every Sunday. I grew up in a very small area in Utah, so everybody was pretty much a member of the church. And if they weren't, they were a little bit ostracized. I grew up not active in the church. My dad rode a motorcycle and had tattoos and long hair. And so we were ostracized for that. And so I have kind of I am still active in my religion. But I believe in the doctrine of my religion and not in the culture in Utah of my religion. So if I can take the people out of it, I've got it. But the way that I was raised and the way that the town is, it was very, I still can't dance because I was like a super white, Christian girl, and your body's not supposed to move when you dance. You can just like, there's no sway, no shaking, nothing sexual. So very, very conservative for me.
Interesting. Ron.
Interesting.
I don't know what to say.
I'm sorry, or no, I'm just kidding.
I was raised in the Church of Christ as a child, and went there for about until I was 18, and then I left the church and pretty much didn't step back into a church until I was 31 years old, and then became a Southern Baptist. So, but I'll tell you a little story about this, and it's kind of connected to why I left the church and why I probably eventually became a horror writer. When I was 12 years old, we had the 7th and 8th grade Sunday school had a cookout at one of the elders' churches. Elders' homes, and since my dad worked in Nashville, he we only had one car at home, and so it was late. I was late there getting there, so the other kids were out there eating hot dogs and stuff, and the elders said, "Come into the house. I need to show you something." So I went there, and he took me down to the den, and he turned out the lights and started this slideshow, and it was pretty much about Judgment Day, and it was pretty. For a 12-year-old boy, it was pretty horrifying. So, you had bodies, the ground breaking open and bodies shooting up like missiles into the sky, and there was like angels, coming down with like some with trumpets and some with flaming swords, and there's like families cowering in their basement and everything, and then there was one slide where Jesus, who was about the size of the amazing colossal man, was ripping the ripping the roof off a house, and there was like a family cowering there. So after that slideshow, I went outside and I had me a hot dog and a Dr. Pepper, and but it was at that point I saw that this church was just trying to scare me. They were trying to scare their youth into converting over to getting baptized and joining the church and everything, and it really disturbed me even at that young age, 12. And so when I become 17 and I knew I wanted to be a writer, I knew that if I was going to write, I couldn't be a writer and write effectively, and if I had to walk that golden tightrope over with hell yawning on both sides of me. So, so that's why I left the church. When I turned 18, and when I met my wife Joyce, we started going to church, and I regained my faith and become a Baptist.
Wow. I want to say it's interesting, but Mercedes might laugh at me.
Laugh at you anyway.
They're all gonna laugh at you.
Used to it. John, how about you, man?
I actually started where Ron ended up. I was born and raised in a Southern Baptist church. My dad was actually a deacon in the church, so it was every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. I didn't have a choice. I was in church. So kind of like Ron said too, at around 18, 19 years old, I walked away from it. And mine wasn't so much for any one thing that hit me. It was just, I was getting to just tired of it being crammed down my throat.
Right.
And so I kind of explored some other things. I mean, I looked into various other religions. I actually was a practicing Wiccan for a while. And once I got in my early 20s, and my wife Angie and I got together and we had kids, and that was kind of, I also rediscovered my faith. And while I'm still technically a member of a Southern Baptist church, I've got to agree with Mercedes on this. Kind of, I believe the teachings, but the people kind of leave me a little wanting, because I'm the one with the long hair. I walk in the church, I've got hair longer than some of the women in the church. So that automatically sets me to the side, and I see the side eyes and stuff like that. So, and my faith has changed some as I've gotten older and understand it more, and kind of have personalized it more. What I feel, the truth behind what I was being taught was, as opposed to just, oh, I have to do this because this is what they told me. No, here's what the broader scope of it is. And that's kind of where I've ended up today.
Nice. Todd.
So
Yeah, Todd.
yeah, yeah, Todd. No, like John and like Ron as well. Although where Ron ended up, I started in the Southern Baptist Church as well. I grew up in Kentucky. I guess I was forced to go to church for most of my young life until my teenage years, when I really got some sort of autonomy and made enough of an argument not to go. My parents still did. My mom actually is a gospel singer, which is cause for some really interesting conversations over dinner. So teenage years really moved away from it, because everything that I kind of saw wrong with the people I grew up with people I went to school with, all the people who were jerks to me, they were all really devout in church. And most of the people who kind of had any stature in my hometown all went to church and were all really devout Christians. So I started to really distance myself from that, because I didn't want to be like that. And I figured I would rather, try to find my own way. And I gave it one last shot. And this is where I've had conversations with Mercedes about this over the years. I dabbled in LDS, Latter-day Saints, for, I would cap it about a year, my first year of college. I did it for stupid reasons, for a girl. And obviously that didn't work out. But, beyond that, I mean, taken in by the promise of divine reward, as opposed to, the condemnation and damnation if you aren't devout. But some bad experiences there ultimately led me to just drop out of it altogether. I had my name expunged from the records and all that jazz. And I've been pretty much living a life of peaceful agnosticism ever since. I hesitate to fall in the line of atheism, because I believe that it's really impossible for us to know. And there's, really no, I can't say for sure that there is no God, but I also can't say for sure that there is. Instead, I'm more focused on living the best life I can, as opposed to living for, divine reward, essentially.
The theme I kept hearing come up is that whole idea of teachings versus culture. And Mercedes, I think you were the first person to bring that up. The thought I kept coming back to is the idea. Now, I grew up in Massachusetts, and Patrick and I, speaking for you, sorry, man, but we both grew up in the Catholic Church. And I think it's probably a universal experience, but I don't know. I guess I just have such vivid visions of the parking lot of the church after Mass gets out, where the same people who shook your hand and said, "Peace be with you," give you the finger to get out of the parking lot first.
Yep.
And I feel like that's, again, it just seems to be such the universal experience, even though three of you are in, or at least were at some point in the same kind of hub of the country, crossing over with, certain denominations and things like that. We all kind of see that same human side of it, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Mercedes, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. You talked about the culture. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I would love to talk about it. So, the tenets of our church are very different. Like, I had never heard of the rapture until I think I read the Lost Behind series when that came out, or whatever. And I was like, what is this? What is this? I had never heard of it. I was like, people just disappear and planes fall out of the sky. And in our religion, we have a very kind, we don't have a condemnation, hellfire sort of thing. And like Todd said, it's more divine reward. We call God our Heavenly Father. We pray to him. He's a kind and loving God. I don't understand this, New Testament angry God. I'm reading in the Bible, the Book of Mormon talks of him as much kinder and stuff like that. But where I grew up, everybody was LDS, right? Everybody. So you would go to church, and the kids that were drunk at the party Saturday night, the night before, are the ones that are up there passing the sacrament, blessing the sacrament. And it was really, you're in school, and you knew that everybody, and almost everybody in my school was a member of the church. People that tended not to be tended to go to a different school because there were so many of we all just were, right? Whether you were active or not, you just were. And so everyone had these expectations. Number one, we didn't date till we were 16. And that was just a rule in our church. So the second it was your 16th birthday, you had 6 guys knocking on your door because they've been waiting for someone to finally turn 16 because they've already dated everybody in this really small town, and it's finally someone new, right? It's fresh blood. They're so excited, and we weren't from that town, so I wasn't related to anybody. So that was great,
Boy, it's almost like you're talking about Kentucky.
Almost right. but there's this expectation, everything in the way it's presented in Utah, and Utah, it's very different in Utah than it is now. I live in Las Vegas, and it's a very different experience being a member of the church here in Las Vegas than it is in Utah, because in Utah, the whole thing is, that for their meetings, everything has to look really great. There have to be perfect refreshments. You have to, when you're having a meeting, and when we all get up and we teach, we don't have paid preachers or anything. It's members of the congregation that take a turn to teach. When it's my turn to teach, well, I'd better have the table laid out, and I'd better have a really pretty tablecloth on it with flowers and a really great object lesson, because that's how it is. Here, we can be reading it off our phones and it's still accepted, but up there, everything is to a really almost unachievable standard, right? And you need to do this, and you shouldn't shop on Sundays, and you shouldn't. And if you do these things, you get the side eye. But it's so frustrating because everybody does those things. And so it's you can't win. You can't do it right. Whereas here, I'm in a very diverse ward. There's a lot of poverty in my ward. Ward is our little denomination is a ward. It's how we're, but wards, stakes, how we're organized. So my own little ward is like very different than a ward in Utah. Very hard scrabble, very, very humble. People, can show up in shorts, and that's great because that's what they have. Whereas in Utah, like, oh, you should be wearing a dress. You should be this. And it's frustrating. I'm sure it's like that everywhere. But the things that people were saying versus the things that people were doing. And I'm like, show me in scripture where it says I have to have the stupid freaking tablecloth. And they can't show you that, but that's just how it is. You know what I mean? And I'm a big, show me where it says that, because otherwise we can let the stupid stuff fall. And I found it very, I don't know. People weren't dressing well enough to be able to go to the wards in Utah sometimes, or people weren't, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's not how a church is supposed to be. That's the tenets of my church say nothing about that. But the people in my church are just being jerks and bullies and pushing people out. So that's what I noticed.
I wasn't planning on saying this, but I'm going to add to what Brennan said earlier. I'm sure his experience was the same as mine. And it's like we all grew up in the same town, basically. I, as a Irish kid from South Massachusetts, was surrounded by Catholicism. It's the same thing. That's why I'm not practicing, haven't for a long time. It's just my paternal grandmother, she was a saint. She really was. And she went to church all the time. But I don't know. I think when she passed away, I was like, I don't have to pretend anymore because I didn't want to upset her. But me personally, I believe in Jesus. But it's weird. It's like, I feel like he's this, and I'm going to word it this way. He's this world's savior. But there's a part of me kind of like Todd where I'm like, but that's all I know. I've never studied any other religion. I don't know how many, but there's been many. Wasn't Catholicism like the first religion to be monotheism? I could be completely wrong, but I don't know. There's been a lot of religions before Catholicism, so why weren't any of those right? So that's my input. I can relate to all you guys, and it just seems like it's a people thing. Like I got sick and tired of the same thing. Like, if you're a jerk, don't pretend you're not a jerk and you're gonna pay money in that little gift basket or whatever the thing is, or the collection basket, just so you can act like you're not a jerk. That's my 2 cents.
Actually, they just tithe another 10%, so it's okay.
Yeah. Brennan, you got a follow-up question?
No, I'd actually like to throw out at you guys, as far as, now that we've kind of set that foundation up, what would you say some of the premier hurdles, as far as your belief system goes, are when it comes to writing horror? I know, Ron, you talked a little bit about that. Let's go to you. Kind of let's hear you expand on that a little bit.
Well, I've kind of always had a sort of a tug of war between, my faith and horror writer, because you feel a little guilty, when you're just pulling out all the stops and writing some really nasty stuff. I mean, you think, well, does Jesus approve of this? And you pretty much know he doesn't approve of it, but it's just gotten to. I'll tell you something that I really haven't talked to about a lot. But when I stopped writing for 10 years, I pretty much tell everybody it was because Zebra shut down the horror line, and I couldn't find a publisher and everything. But about half of that was because I sincerely thought that God had taken that away from me because He didn't want me to write horror. Because I accepted Christ, like in 1996, I accepted Christ in January. In October, I lost everything. I lost my writing career and everything. So as a new Christian, that was the first thing that popped in my head, that, God had a hand in that, and He just didn't want me to write this stuff anymore. But I don't believe that anymore. And when I came back in 2006, and organization. For whatever reason, I think Todd Keisling still like this. So kind of made my peace with that.
John, let's hear from you. What are some of the hurdles that you feel like you've kind of had to think about, overcome, what have you?
It's kind of the same thing. It's that juggling act. My influences were Richard Lehman, Jack Ketchum, Brian Keene. These guys wrote some really intense things. And of course, when you start out writing, you're emulating your influences. And so it was really hard to kind of balance, well, how can I write, this character swears a lot. How do I write that when I personally wouldn't? Mm-hmm. And it's almost a disassociation act, because I had to stop and realize, if I'm going to be honest about who this character is, that's who the character is. It comes back to the "we are not what we write" aspect of all this. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that go, "Oh, you're a horror writer, so you've got skulls in the closet and you wear nothing but black and you sacrifice puppies or whatever." And it's like, no, not at all. In fact, what I've discovered is most horror writers are probably more well-adjusted than anyone else, because we are exercising that darkness within ourselves onto the page. And once I kind of got to that, and when I did my first book, I had made contact with Ron by that point, and I reached out to him on Facebook, and I was like, "Hey, how do I justify this? Being a person of faith and writing what I write." And he actually helped me kind of understand and come to terms with a lot of that too, just kind of because he'd already been through it himself. Mm-hmm. But it's still that act. And there are still, I can't write overly extreme scenes because they just don't sit right with me. I can't get it out. I can read it, but I can't create it. And I think that's where my limits are. And I think that is down to what my faith dictates that I'm able to write.
I think the word that, I'm not sure I've heard it yet, but the word that keeps kind of popping up in my mind is empathy. Yeah. Ron, when you said that, you felt like your career was taken away from you, and then you eventually had to kind of come to terms with the fact that that wasn't it. I feel like you have to almost kind of accept that through your writing, you can create characters that, you guys are not writing surface level stuff where, bad stuff happens to this person because they're bad. It's more deep. There's more depth to it than that. So, where you're creating characters that a reader is able to sympathize with, empathize with, understand, and that, could even help that person through something of a tough time. And to me, that's a level of empathy that I think that horror writers are able to demonstrate and get into more than a lot of other genres. My opinion, anyway. Todd, I don't really know how to throw this question to you. Do you have hurdles? Is there anything you won't do?
You have standards, Todd.
Todd, are you just good at everything, or?
Well, I don't want to brag, but when I was younger, I had hurdles. I really struggled with it because, I grew up reading Stephen King and Dean Koontz, and and kind of moved away from horror in my teenage years and early college years to more like Chuck Palahniuk, who's constantly, pushing buttons. And, I started reading more philosophical stuff, especially for school. And anytime I would write something that seemed like it was approaching, one of those like no turning back, there's no coming back from this, Keisling. You write this and it's, you've crossed that line. Anytime I would get there, I would kind of get a little, worried about crossing it, simply because of what would my mom say? What would my dad say? And they're still really devout. And for a long time, a lot of people in my family really had issues with the stuff I wrote and had trouble separating me from the fiction because their concern was more, where did this come from? You know, it's more, we raised you better than this. It's like this has nothing to do, nothing to do with you, Granny. I'm sorry. But so I had those hurdles to begin with, and that, even though I don't really consider them hurdles anymore. It's more just like, and I it's more just like, okay, this is an extra, set of tools in my arsenal. So now if I want to horrify someone, then I can, and the story is going that way, then, I know a little bit, about Christianity and religion, then I can push those buttons a little bit if I want to. I don't always do it. I think I said I think it was the Horror Aficionados group on Goodreads talking about the Midnight in the Pentagram anthology. Somebody asked about my faith and beliefs and all that, and I kind of gave them the Reader's Digest version. And I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. Oh, typically whenever I start to write stories that take place in the South, religion ultimately comes up. And that's because I always equate my youth with, that was a part of it, whether I like it or not. I mean, my freshman year of high school, I was a member of FCA. I don't know if that's still around. Is FCA still a thing?
Yes, it is in the South. It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at.
Okay, so it's like Fellowship of Christian
Athletes.
Yeah. So I was like a member of that. I even went to like an FCA conference my freshman year of high school, and I just didn't fit. I wasn't a good fit. I questioned everything, which didn't make me very popular in that crowd anyway. Because they're like, the argument was always, well, you got to have faith. Like, well, I guess I don't then.
That goes back to the people too, though, because
exactly.
If I look back in high school, half the people that bullied me in high school were members of the FCA. So
same. So, I guess I kind of, Brennan, I guess to really answer the question, I mean, I do not have hurdles currently. My hurdles tend to be more along the lines of, moral or ethical stuff, like talking about suicide, talking about rape, things that are really extreme in my mind. Like I take those more carefully simply because I don't want to influence a reader to do something to harm themselves or others.
Right.
So I am more careful around those topics than I am about, talking about the church, talking about any religion. I try to be respectful, but, at the same time, also, I have characters who may be part of the church who may not have the best of intentions.
Oh, gee.
And
Creek. I'm just saying.
I know, right? What's a Devil's Creek? I don't know what that is.
I think that's a great answer, though, because you kind of went back to initial hurdles, and what I kind of took away from that is, depending on your belief system, depending on the person you are, you're going to have hurdles in some way, shape, or form, and they might take the shape of, what would my God, what would my Creator think of what I'm trying to put down on the page, or they might take the shape of what would my grandmother think of what I'm trying to put down on the page.
Yeah.
Mercedes, I want to hear from you. Same question.
I kind of feel like I get it doubled a little bit because I'm a woman, because I'm a Christian woman. So there's the whole, is a Christian writer supposed to be, or a writer of faith supposed to be writing something dark? And then there's the whole, whoa, but she's a woman and she's a mother and she's writing something dark. So I kind of feel like that's something I have to face a lot. For me, in my faith growing up, we're not supposed to talk about bad things. So we believe in demons. You don't talk about demons. We, believe in like kind of an exorcism or the casting out of demons, but you do not talk about it. So for me, opening up and talking about things that were unpleasant felt like I was crossing a line, and that was really hard. And we don't discuss things that are sexual, and we don't discuss like you don't talk about stuff that's hard. You talk about, having faith and pioneer ancestors, and my ancestors crossed the plains because way back when it was legal to kill people that were in my church. There was actually Governor Boggs did this thing, and if you saw someone who was a member of my church, you could shoot them on sight, and it was legal. And so that's why the Mormons, got their hand cards. And I still say Mormon because that's how we always tell people what we are, because that's what people understand is the word Mormon. But we would get our hand carts and walk across, the U.S. because we were getting murdered and burned out and killed and raped and all these things. But you don't talk about that. You're just like, they sang songs as they came across the plains. And sure, people died in the snow when we buried them, but there's a wonderful afterlife for us. And there's even a song in our hymn book, and one of the verses goes, and if we die before our journey's through, all is well, So it's just kind of this, ooh. You don't talk about it. So, and you don't talk about depression, and you don't talk about these things. So I felt that when I was starting to write things that were a little more frightening and a little more dark, I was breaking the taboo, because you don't discuss the darkness, and you don't discuss these things, even though we all face it, right? We all have terrible things that happen to us, but in my faith, you just don't discuss that. And so that was the biggest hurdle for me, is actually opening my mouth in the first place, because you don't want to, I've always been taught, you don't focus, you have an attitude of gratitude, but you can't just like pray the hurt away, right? You can't pray the depression away. You can't, and so those are my hurdles, is saying something in the first place, writing about dark things in the first place, and being, in a sense, having people disappointed in me, like, oh, like my mother-in-law, whom I adore, the most wonderful woman. She's like, can't you just write some good Christian fiction?
You might make more.
Just, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I can't, I'm sorry, and it's hard for them that I would dare say something negative or write the darkness, because aren't I inviting the devil in? What am I doing to my children? What? My house is decorated with skulls. I don't sacrifice puppies, but it's hard, because I feel like I don't fit anywhere, right? Like, as a horror writer, oh, look, she's Christian. She doesn't drink. She doesn't do these things. She's not going to come back to the rooms and do this stuff. So I'm kind of on the sidelines there. And in the world of faith, oh, she's a horror writer. She writes about demons. She burns people to the ground. So I don't fit. I will never fit, apparently. I fit with you guys, but it's hard.
We appreciate your darkness.
Thank you.
The best kind of circle of friends is a close, tight-knit one, is my experience in life. So this is really, I'm going to throw this out to whoever wants to answer first. Has there been a book or any kind of story, really, that you've written or talked about that has gotten backlash where it was really unexpected on your end, specifically related to something to do with faith or any type of religion topic that I might not have covered so far?
Actually, yeah. When I did my first novel, Consequences, of course, my mother was proud that I'd done this, and my parents had never really discouraged me from reading horror or enjoying it growing up, which was a surprise considering how devout they both were. But I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. And when I gave her a copy of that first book and she sat down to read it, for the next week, I'm just waiting. I'm like, she's going to tear me apart for the content in this book. The only thing she told me was she couldn't finish it because I used bad language.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wait, what? That was your issue with this? Okay.
Todd, how about Devil's Creek? Have you heard back from anyone back in Kentucky, man?
Well, I was really hesitant to send copies of the manuscript to my mom and my dad. My dad, to my knowledge, did not finish it, but not because he wasn't enjoying it. He's just very busy with his career. My mom read it a few times, actually. She enjoyed it. My dad enjoyed what he read of it. That's the funny thing, is that Devil's Creek, when as far as like religion is concerned, is probably the most blasphemous thing I've ever written in terms of like, the Christian church and what have you, and religion in general. I mean, essentially, that's the book's about a town being destroyed by fanatical religion.
Right.
Spoilers. And what's funny is that that's the book that everybody in my family has seemed to like support the most, because I don't know, I guess maybe they kind of recognize the importance of it in my writing career, or they take my writing career more seriously now. I don't know. Like I've been writing for God since I was taking it seriously since I was in college. So they've been reading a lot of stuff, for, almost 20 years. And the stuff earlier on seemed to be the ones that like blew their minds and made them ashamed to be related to me. Mercedes, also got the question from one of my aunts about why can't I write, just a good Christian story.
Wow, Todd.
And,
Come together, you and I.
What's funny is that I feel like I did write the best, the best Christian story I could, and that's Devil's Creek. Go buy it, kids.
Wait.
I am also itching to read the Todd Keisling version of the Left Behind books.
Well, it would be one novel. It wouldn't be a whole series, and I definitely would have named the protagonist Rayford Steele.
What a name. Ron, was the Essential Six stuff? Well, I know that was a collection from your early days in the 90s. Were any of those stories ever brought up by someone and pretty much presented with the same question as Mercedes or John or Todd?
I'm still waiting for a member of my church to get a hold of a copy and stir something up, because I'm still very active in my church. I work with the youth. I write the Christmas play every year. Not this year, where COVID's kind of got that messed up. But I'm in the choir, and I have taught Sunday school before. But and the church members know I'm a writer. Most of them know I'm a horror writer. I think most of them think I write R.L. Stine type story, books. Some innocent, family friendly, kid friendly books. But
That's awesome.
But
those are the people who need to read your book next.
Those people get a blurb your next book, man.
But Todd mentioned Midnight in the Pentagram. Ken McKinley, he invited me to come on, contribute a story, and I bowed out of that one because I work with children and the youth in the church. I thought, well, if I promote this book and it's got somebody sitting in the middle of a pentagram, that's going to raise a stink in the church, and they're going to ask me to, step away, because, I guess people have set ideas in the church about, who should be, teaching their children and encouraging their children and everything. And extreme horror stuff doesn't go well with that, because, and I found that as far as organized religion is concerned, it's not very tolerant of imagination. We've got churches in this area that will not allow their children to believe in Santa Claus. They won't let them go trick or treating. Won't let them go trick or treating. Won't let them believe in the tooth fairy or anything, because they say, well, that's a lie, and I can't lie to my children. But I believe that's a disservice, and it's almost like child abuse in my opinion, because I think children need imagination to, there's something essential for a child to believe in, fiction. And there's a big, a few years ago there was a big thing about don't let your kids read Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of preachers down here preaching against Harry Potter and everything. But my boy, he's read every one of them, and that's fine with me. He loves The Hobbit. He loves Lord of the Rings. I just think fantasy is very, in the development of a child, fantasy and stuff like that. So I think it's very important for him.
That's fascinating to me. I mean, you take someone like C.S. Lewis, who was a extremely devout Christian, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
Are those books not allowed for those kids in those churches you mentioned? I mean,
for some, yeah.
Wow.
Actually, my wife taught a Sunday school class based on Narnia when the movie came out, because if you watch that movie, I mean, there's a lot of Christian elements in it. I mean,
Aslan is Jesus.
Aslan is basically Jesus Christ, and I helped her with the Sunday school lessons. We had like the wardrobe, and we had trees, Christmas trees up in the classroom, and the kids loved it, and then we took them to the movie, and the church was very supportive of that, and I thought that was great.
Yeah,
it's like I remember I was maybe 15, 16, old enough that I was starting to question some things, but not quite old enough to do anything about the questions that I was formulating. And our church youth group was taken to another church to watch this presentation. And what it boiled down to was kind of like what Ron was saying. You shouldn't read Harry Potter because it's about magic. Captain Planet was bad because they had supernatural forces. Care Bears were bad because it showed that their energy came from their centers, which was Eastern religion teaching. And I remember very vividly listening to this and thinking, okay, if I follow your train of logic, I can make anything evil. Right. Chocolate chip cookie dough is evil because it promotes gluttony. Puppies are evil.
Good,
yeah, puppies are evil by association because some Satanists might. I hate going back to this. My dogs are going to look at me funny when I get off of this. Because by association, Satanists sometimes sacrifice them. Therefore, they're evil. And I'm like, you're not doing anything but trying to create drones and people who refuse to think for themselves.
And fear. What is?
Yeah, it's fear mongering. Yeah.
You don't teach with fear. By the way, I'm going to do a wellness check on your puppies after this broadcast.
Yeah.
I will post pictures of all four when we get off of here. They are all fine.
That just sounds
to see those.
I'm going to need timestamps on those photos, John.
There'll be timestamps.
Newspaper. The thing that I didn't get when I was learning about religion, and I got that too, the Harry Potter thing. I was a kid in the 90s, so that was big for us too. But I don't know about you guys, but I never understood, why are we learning about these stories in the Bible? People are being bludgeoned to death. Everything that you can do that's horrible is in there, and it gets lessons. But why is that book okay, but this other book's not okay? Why can't they both teach something? Like with my kid, I'm going to raise him to. I'm not knocking anyone's religion, but I want him to think of different points of views, so he can become a well-rounded human, adults, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, everybody in the Bible, nobody is likable. Even the heroes of the Bible are do terrible things, and it's hard. But right. I also think that being able to teach your child different viewpoints is kind of a luxury that I feel our parents didn't really have. You know what I mean? Like, we have the internet. We see different viewpoints.
Right.
I'd agree with
that. I don't think that it's their parents are awful. I love parents, but that wasn't. We were very isolated where we were. That's what we had, So I think our youth, like my daughter, she's a member of the Gay Straight Alliance because so many of her friends are in this lifestyle, and she just and I'm like, go support your friends, do it, teach people about love, and that at home is a very big. That doesn't go well with some of the family,
Right.
My in-laws would really rather that wasn't the case. And I'm like, listen, just because you don't think that you've ever met a person who is gay, just because you think that it's like my daughter's experiences with people and their experience with people are so different. They're like, well, I don't know a gay person. I'm like, oh, you do. You just don't know.
Right.
One of the smartest human beings ever, Leonardo da Vinci, was gay. He was vegetarian. He's everything that, like, it's not new.
Not a vegetarian. No.
Transgender is nothing new either. Well, that's the thing that I also don't get is I have family members that I love them. They're good people. And I won't say who, but one of my loved ones isn't he thinks that being gay is a sin, but he's okay with them, which confuses the ever-loving shit out of me. Why can't it just be if your spirit's good, then it goes and gets rewarded? If it's bad, it goes in the fire pit.
It does at the end. I mean, that's my personal belief. You know what I mean? That's what I think happens. Good is rewarded, evil is punished. Everything else is like semantics.
And I'll jump onto that. I in talking about the Bible, and that's just kind of how I've come to look at the book. I mean, other than it being probably the greatest horror novel ever written, I say that with some sarcasm. There's an awful lot of horrible things that happen in the Bible. I do not disagree with that at all. It's also a combination of stories, and man created stories. They wrote them down, even if they were dictated, from a divine power. It was by man's hand that they were written. Mm-hmm. And, to me, that makes it, by its nature, imperfect. So I look more at the Bible as a philosophical document, as a means of, living your life, as opposed to it being the, verbatim dictation from God, as a lot of folks tend to view it. So, I look at the Bible no different than I look at, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, the Bhagavad Gita, I think it's called, the Quran, the Torah. You look at those documents, you look at going all the way back to, you look at the teachings of Aristotle, Socrates, there are so many different documents that you can draw from that time period. And I feel like the Bible is just one of them, that teaches you how to live a good life. The Bible just, in my opinion, goes into a lot more detail as to what theoretically might happen to you if you do not live a good life. And kind of gives like the whole origin story, if you will. That's kind of my viewpoint on the Bible as a document to live by. There's a lot of stuff in there that I think is fluff. I think that was just written and put in there to further an agenda by someone, or someones, I should say. Lots of people. But if you break it down to its core, you have a series of teachings that say, don't be a dick. Love your neighbor. Honor your spouse. Respect them. Respect your parents. I don't think those are bad things to live by. They are very universal things. You can respect your parents. You can love them. If they're bad to you, then they're still your parents. You love them, but you don't have to do anything. Have anything to do with them if you don't want to. It's don't murder anybody. Just don't. It's bad. Just don't do that. And that's speaking personally. I mean, I grew up with it. I did not just throw out, those personal, those stories of morality and ethics I didn't throw those out. I still live by those. But, I guess that all goes back to, understanding that it was, written by a man or, a human being, an imperfect creature.
I know I will give credit. Growing up, I never heard it referred to as the literal word of God. I always heard it referred to as the inspired word of God. Taken in that aspect, kind of what you're saying is exactly it, because you do have humans that commission the translations and perform the translations over the years. Humans make mistakes.
I mean, if you look at the King James Bible, the King James was an asshole. There's a lot of speculation that, bits and pieces of that translation were left on the cutting room floor to further his agenda. In that translation that was made available, and I am definitely not a historian. I not a scholar of this stuff. I just, have done my homework over the years. And I feel like that example is, feel like that's a perfect example of why, like, as you would say, it's an inspired document, why it would be used by, certain figures, certain parties, certain just groups in general to hold sway over a larger population. I see it as an ethical and moral philosophical document. I also see it as a means of controlling people.
I have always wondered what was lost in those 2000, plus years, because it wasn't just one language. It was, I don't know how many, but it was multiple languages that you translate. Play a telephone game. All of us are in one line. Like, that message is going to be different with just 6 of us in the same room that speak the same language. That's why I've always thought, like, well, what else is missing? I've heard there's other chapters that have been lost or, ripped out of the original manuscript, wherever they called it back then. And
there have. I mean, if you look at I think it's called the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
Is that what Judas? The thing
if you look
Judas?
at some of the other scrolls that are not recognized by the Catholic Church, like there is a Gospel of Judas. There's the 6th and 7th books of Moses, supposedly, that outline like all of they're more like esoteric. They look like something out of Lovecraft, believe it or not. I mean, if you look it up, you have these documents that are like, here's how you conjure an angel. Here's how you summon a demon and control it. It's all those aspects, those more occult-like aspects that you would expect to see in a religious document of that nature, because, especially the Old Testament, there's some really wicked shit going on there,
Absolutely. And just to throw this out there, and someone definitely feed off of this, but what I also go back to is in other religions and other documented religions, books, or however you want to word it, there's talks of a great flood, and there's also recognition of Jesus actually being historically a real person, which is, for me personally, why I go back to, I think that there are a lot of truths to the Bible. I think that there is a lot of truth to Jesus himself. That's why I believe, again, he is this world's savior. The universe is very big, so that's why I word it that way. Anyone want to feed off of what I or Todd just said?
Well, like I said, I spent a lot of time researching other religions whenever I rebelled. And the one thing that I discovered, and it was actually one of the things that helped to kind of guide me back towards Christianity, there are commonalities amongst all religions. The window dressing, so to speak, is often different. But there are a lot of commonalities. In fact, when I was Wiccan, I made the comparison that Wicca and Christianity are not that much different. It's just what names you put on them and the names you put on the specific aspects. ticked people off on both sides, of course, but it was what I was discovering as I went through this. And so, yeah, it's, I think in terms of religion, whatever that commonality is, to me, made the most sense that that was what was true. And in my case, I saw that paralleling a lot of what I had already been taught, analyzed, and looked at differently. You know, growing up in the South, and I've said this before, there was a lot of what I call casual racism in the South,
Yes.
where you would have people go to church on Sunday and be talking about loving everyone, but then you would hear in conversations on Monday or Tuesday or whatever, just the little things they would say where they're putting down another race or another type of people or even another denomination.
Mm.
And it's like, how is this what you were just talking about yesterday? And that's, I don't know. I think it comes back to those commonalities. And I think I came to a point where when it came to the Bible, I felt like what was supposed to happen is I was supposed to read it, and that was my time to commune with God. And he was to let me know what I was supposed to learn from that. And what I learned from that was kind of what Todd was talking about, those moralistic lessons, the love your neighbor, treat everyone equally, treat them how you want them to treat you. You know, be open to understanding that just because they disagree with you doesn't make them a bad person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like I said, that was just kind of what I learned from it, and that's kind of what I try to live by now.
And you know, John, real quick, and I'll shut up so Ron and Mercedes can talk. I also want to just point out that, you know, the folks at your church who were giving you a hard time about your hair pointed at a picture of Jesus.
Oh, you think I haven't?
Wait, what is it? The white Jesus with blue eyes, or
All Jesuses.
Well,
Yeah, pretty much all Jesuses had long hair,
White
and if
Jesus
you look at
has long hair.
and if you look at Nazarene culture, the men had long hair.
Yeah.
So
what was that movie where it was based on a nonfiction book where the kid goes to heaven, doesn't die, sees Jesus. There's a kid across the world paints the real version of him, and it looks nothing like the long-haired Jesus. And I've seen that painting, and it just, I don't know if it's in my head or not, but it's a powerful painting. Does anyone? Oh, Heaven is for Real. That's it. Has anyone seen that movie?
I have. Yeah.
That came out as a hoax. The kid ended up saying that never happened. So.
Oh man. All right.
Oh, she killed your train of thought, man.
Real, except.
Well, I was
Thanks,
going to ask what
Mercedes.
people thought about it, but that's kind of derailed me. So why don't you, Brennan?
I mean, erase that. It's so true.
It's the best movie I've ever seen, Patrick.
Oh, well.
Followed up closely by God is Not Dead with like Kevin Sorbo or whatever.
right.
With Hercules.
With Hercules. So going back to the Bible, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people of faith or people that have grown up with some sort of spiritual background, why we are such good horror writers and sci-fi writers and fantasy writers, because we're reading these books, these different religious texts that are just don't take place in, you know, that have all these magical things. You know, a man is killed and rises from the dead. There are demons that come from the other world, and you know, and you take a sacrament and you're cleansed, and just all these things that we take as that's how it is. You know, that's how it is. Well, of course, a man rose from the dead, and he's not a zombie. You know, and then we go out and can write these like creative, dark, or wonderful, mysterious things because we spent our lives just kind of with one foot in the secular and one foot in the spiritual, and kind of get to use those muscles, you know, like it's not hard for me to imagine, you know, demons or whatever, because growing up, we believed in demons. We just didn't talk about them. It's, you know, and I think that is a good springboard for a lot of writers. I mean, there's so many Christians and people of different faiths that are amazing writers in those genres. It's just kind of astounding because you think that, you know, a horror writing specifically, you think there wouldn't be a lot of people of faith. Like, you just would kind of be surprised. But I'm amazed how many people are like, oh yeah,
Right.
like this is
Yeah.
it's what I grew up with. I ate Christ as a kid, so or whatever.
Every day.
Now, do any of you have a message to someone that, because I don't really know of many people that talk about this for one reason or another that are horror writers. Does anyone out there have a message for someone that may be listening to this that maybe too shy or just didn't know that there were so many writers in this genre? Maybe a aspiring writer, if you will, that doesn't know how to handle being faithful, but kind of is balancing, well, what can I write? What can't I write? What would you guys say to those people?
Be honest.
Yeah.
Damn, that's...
Stop, Todd.
Be honest to the extent with which you are comfortable doing so.
Yes.
That's
Thank you, John.
probably, yeah.
Perfect.
John, quick.
Ron, how about you, man? You've been quiet for a while. What's on your mind?
Well, I look back at my childhood, and one thing that really helped me, realize that horror was, okay, was because my mother was she was a very devout Christian, but she loved horror, and she loved to go to horror movies, and she didn't read horror books. She read the old Gothic romance where, the lady with the windswept gowns is on the cliff with the castle in the background. But I remember, my dad wouldn't go to horror movies with her, and so she drugged me to the horror movies. So like at the age of 10, we went to see House of Dark Shadows because we loved Dark Shadows on TV, and of course it was different than TV because Barnabas Collins was projectile vomiting blood, 2 miles, so and she was trying to cover my face and everything, but I'd already seen it, so it was too late. But and then she, at the age of 12, she took me to see Let's Scare Jessica to Death, which really,
Wow.
really screwed me up. But
ever since you mentioned that movie, I've heard a lot of fellow horror writers talk about.
You can watch it, yeah, because it's a movie where you think you know what happens, or it because it's about a lady who's come out of an asylum, and they move to the country, and then strange things happen, and there's like vampires and stuff, and you really don't know whether it's actually happening or if it's in her mind, or it's a low budget movie, but it's very effective, but Mama, she always encouraged my horror writing, and my first novel was based on her as a child. A lot of people don't believe it, but she had the gift of second sight, and she had a very uncanny ability to predict people's deaths. And our next door neighbor was handing her a watermelon over the fence one day, and she saw him lying in a casket in his Sunday clothes, and 2 weeks later he was dead. But she'd done that time and time again, and it depressed her, and she was very nervous and depressed because she had this ability, and she was scared to tell people about it, and she felt bad about that, but that kind of, she was always supportive of me. She bought me famous monster magazines when I was a kid, and monster models, and my father didn't really understand, my father didn't understand me a lot about certain things, but I guess I was Mama's boy, so
Yeah.
But
I have a question about that. With your mother, is that something like your church condones if somebody has some sort of, ability or gift?
it was something she didn't talk about. It was
okay.
It was something that the family knew about, she'd had it since she was a child. She had typhoid fever, and when she came out of the fever, my grandmother said, she started showing signs of being able to do that.
Wow.
And I'm waiting for, let's say it skips a generation, so I'm kind of waiting for one of my kids to pick it up. But so far,
Let's hope it doesn't require typhoid fever first.
No.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Okay, right.
Right.
But I do believe in stuff like that. I mean, a lot of people don't believe, people can have precognition and stuff like that. But I believe people. It's just like some people believe in ghosts, but I think you can like pick up on an impression of of some kind of traumatic experience or emotion,
Yeah.
that still lingers in a place. Because I've taught, my grandmother told me tons of stories about stuff like that too. So
That's interesting that your mom couldn't go to people that are faith driven, but if it happens right in front of their eyes, there's something wrong with that. That boggles my mind.
yeah, well, she acted like she was ashamed of it. I mean, it really bothered her. It wasn't like a gift to her; it was like a curse to her. So, but I mean,
Oh, sorry. Go continue.
I remember one time my brother was gonna. I think it was on Labor Day. My brother was like 16, 17 years old. He was going to drive, to town or something, and she told him, don't drive to town. Bad's gonna happen. And he somebody backed out of the highway in front of him, and he had a wreck and broke his nose and everything like that. And she knew that was going to happen. So, but that's what I based that first book on. When I decided to write a horror book, I had read all these stories. I'd heard all these stories about things she'd done and everything, and plus on my side of the family there had been a triple murder, so I kind of combined the two, and that's the first book that Zebra published.
And what's the name of that book?
Hindsight.
Hindsight. In my faith, we believe in like spiritual gifts, and we read the Book of Mormon is the religious book. We also read the Bible, but the Book of Mormon is the main one, and it like lines out what spiritual gifts we, some of them that we believe in, like precognition, discernment of spirits and things like that, like walking in a room and being able to tell if there's something bad or something good there. Right. But at the same time, you're not supposed to talk about it. So it's like, it says, oh, here's the power of discernment, but So my first book that came out is about a girl that has experiences like that, but just can't talk about it. I'm saying, so I think it's interesting that we're kind of digging into, like all writers, like the things that bother you, the things that get you, the things that you can't talk about. I mean, that's what we write about, but we have that kind of cool, dark influence, I don't know.
That brings up a good point. Sorry to cut you off, Brennan, but I'll start with you, Mercedes. If you're not comfortable with the question, please say pass. Is there anything that bothers you? And it doesn't have to be with your religion. It could be on society itself. But is there anything that bothers you that you find yourself being drawn back to, if you will, comment on through your stories?
All my stories are about society. In my stories, I find myself a lot commenting about people taking advantage of other people, and especially women and girls. So like Little Dead Red, which is a novella I wrote, is about a girl. It's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, and it's about a girl that gets murdered and her mom trying to find justice, right? And I wrote a story that came out this year called the Urban Moon, and it's about a girl, and it's a take on like the Swan Maiden tale, where someone takes her coat and her feathers, and she can't go back home, where someone takes her clothes and sexually assaults her at a club, and then videos it and puts it on YouTube or online, and how everyone like victim shames her and society, and how people can like hurt how people hurt other people, and then at the end, hopefully there's some strength or resilience, but not always, But that's what I come back to. I always come back to things that are dark, and I come back to people that are hurting other people. Because I'm just a friggin' ray of sunshine.
You actually are.
She's a hit at parties.
I am the best.
Let's go with you, John.
I've made no secret that my hot button topic is bullying. I was bullied a lot growing up, and not even so much a physical thing, just that someone making me feel like I didn't belong. And, even through early adulthood, I saw that. And I think it was less intentional in adulthood. It was just how people were conditioned or whatever, and how they acted. But I find myself quite often going back to one of the characters in my book is a victim of that exact same kind of bullying. And I wrote a novel called The Journal of Jeremy Todd, which was about a guy who it actually drove him into a clinical psychopathic depression, and he went off his meds before the high school reunion. And that book was my way of dealing with those high school bullies. Every person in that book that bullied the main character was either indirectly based or a conglomeration of my high school bullies. And that was my way to cope with it. And that was my first clue that, maybe I'm not as over that as I thought I was.
Yeah.
And the more I've written and the more I'm kind of seeing that theme come back, I think the writing is my therapy for it.
And you know what, man? I'm not saying this is the case, but maybe you'll never get over it. And maybe that's...
Oh, I probably won't, but I've kind of made my peace with that it's at a level where I'm not over it, but I've accepted it and it doesn't dominate my life anymore. And I think that was probably the best I could have hoped for in that situation.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite content that that's where I've gotten.
Yeah. It sounds like it's kind of like the fuel for your fire, which you've used in a very positive way.
Yeah. I like to think so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people like you as a writer and as a person, man. So I think it's working for you.
Right. He's okay.
He's okay.
Love you, John.
Love you too, Todd.
Ron, how about you, sir?
One of the things that triggers me is racism. The little town I grew up in, I mean, all the white folks lived down in the valley. All the black folks lived up on the hill. It was a clear distinction. I mean, the black kids at school were put in special ed because, frankly, the teachers and the principal didn't think they were intelligent enough to be with the other kids. I mean, it was awful, And I remember when we did Valentine's, we had everybody made their shoebox to have Valentine's, and my mom would make me Valentine's to give to the black kids, and I'd have to sneak them in there. I couldn't, if the other kids never gave the black kids any Valentine's, but mom made sure that I had some for them, and it was just, I grew up with people in my family who were racist, and I butted heads with them when I was a teenager a lot. And so if you read some of my books like Fear, I mean, there's some clear, stuff about injustice and, racial injustice and everything. Now, I've used the N word in that book, and I've had some people say, well, he's racist, But I think to write about racism effectively, you've got to depict racism as what it is. I mean, you can't
show it warts and all.
Yeah, you can't pull punches, and I'm seeing lately, it's like, well, let's don't use that word, or let's respect people's feelings, and that's good to a certain point. But when you're depicting evil, it's kind of hard for you to pull your punches and just kind of water it down a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Todd,
I'm sorry, real quick before we go to Todd, Ron, I just want to jump in there real quick. I think that there is a huge difference between, say a 30-something-year-old writer from Massachusetts putting that word in their book versus a, sorry, Ron, but not 30-year-old writer from Tennessee putting that word, somebody who grew up in that climate. And I know I've heard, I don't remember where, but I've heard Lansdale talk about the same thing, where when he writes a scene that involves a racist character, I mean, he lives in Texas. I mean, he's seen it. And the same thing with you. And I'll tell you, man, just, as somebody who works with young children, like that story you told about your mom making those Valentines so that you could bring just a little bit of sunshine to those kids' days, because it sure as hell sounds like they didn't have a lot of it. That breaks my heart. And I could see how years and years later that would be something that sticks with you and needs to come out in some way, shape, or form through your writing.
My takeaway from this is that I love Ron's mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I had that same thought.
If she was still around, she'd love you too, Mercedes.
Oh.
I mean,
my mother died a month before my first novel came out,
Oh.
which was a very bittersweet thing because I wanted her to read it before she died, and she said I want to read it as a book, and she never got that chance, and so that book, it's got a special place in my heart, but it was very bittersweet at the time. That first book signing was really hard.
Oh,
Sure.
Because I wanted to see her come through that door and see me sitting in that chair, but it never happened though.
Ron, when did that come out? What year? I know it was early 90s.
1990. She died in November of 89. So.
Oh, the year I was born. Okay, awkward.
Now, do you know how old I am? I just turned 61, so I'm quite a bit older than you are.
But yeah, you're still younger than my parents by a few years. So, I do have a question about that book signing. Now, is it? Forgive me if this is not the best way to word it, but has it become less difficult to approach and discuss that book and possibly sign that book now that it's been 30, almost 2 years later?
It is, yeah. It, I mean, that's one of my favorite books that I've written. I mean, it's got a lot of family history in it, and it was, at the time I wrote it, I was having little stories published in the small press magazines, and so it was my step up. I mean, it was. Actually having your first book be a mass market paperback by a major New York publisher, I mean, that was just something that didn't happen to a country boy out in Tennessee, But so I'm very grateful for what happened, but yeah, I mean, I love that book. It's next to Fear. I think that's my favorite book that I've wrote.
And I know that I think it's fair to say the majority of fans of horror books, Zebra has a special place in their heart. It's just one of those eras where I know, because you told us, it was kind of looked down back then, but nowadays it's one of those things where it's like they had a great run.
Yeah, back then it was like the red-headed stepchild of horror publishing. Like I said, I think I said this on the last interview with I went to the First World Horror Convention, and I was on a panel with Charles Grant, and Charles, he said, I've read your stuff, it's damn good, but why the hell are you writing for Zebra? So I thought, well, thanks, but yeah, I mean, everybody, the big guys were writing for Tor and other publishers like that, and the Zebra writers were just kind of, because Zebra, Zebra was mostly in for, making the money. They wouldn't. I mean, it's not like indie publishing today where people with a great love for the genre or the publishers. It was just mostly a money making thing, and they were just trying to put out as many books as they could, and in the process, it overloaded the system and brought a lot of horror lines down in the process. Along with some other publishers.
I know that current writers, modern writers that were Zebra writers is you, Lansdale, Edward Lee, and I feel like John Skip was, but maybe I'm completely off base with that. There's probably more, but I can't think of him.
Skip was a little bit after. Well, he. I forgot where him
Skip
and
and Spectre, I don't think were on Zebra. They were on like Berkeley or something like that.
Okay,
like that, yeah.
It was close. It had to be close. Like from the years that they shut down to when they came along. Okay, so moving on, Todd. We did not get to you, sir. The question,
okay.
Brennan, do you remember what I asked?
Who are you guys? I don't remember.
We are.
No,
My name is Michael David Wilson. That's Bob Pastorella. We are. This is horror.
I already talked to those guys this year.
You whore. You traitor.
Well, I do want to say.
I know it had to do with what? Oh no, I don't. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know what it was.
Well, Patrick, real quick, I do want to say that Ron is an honor to share a publisher with you now.
Oh,
Thank
yes. Ken McKinley, we get paid
Yes.
every time.
Oh,
You too.
yes, absolutely. I get to be part of that party too.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, like Ken and Paul Goblich with Thunderstorm, and
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got some good publishers out there who just love. They respect the authors and
Yeah.
and they love the genre, and you didn't have that back, with the mass market publishing. Really, you didn't have that respect. I mean, they saw your stuff as a commodity, and that was about as far as it went. But now, when I came back to writing in 2006, I had a lot of say so with what was going to be on the cover, and I got to keep my titles, and I mean, it's just been a great association with every indie publisher I've worked with.
Brennan will be joining the ring too. Me, Mercedes will be the only ones that have not been published
That's
with
right.
Silver Shamrock.
Wow.
Brennan.
Brennan's.
How does it feel to be hated, Patrick? How does that feel?
I'm used to it. Look at my face. It's the type of face you just want to punch.
As someone who designed your podcast logo and had to look at your face for hours, yeah.
That's harsh, man. I don't know how to retort to that.
That's okay. I love it.
There is.
Me too. I don't know what to say. Brennan, go.
and moderately on that subject, congrats, Ron, to being the first acceptance for the next big Silver Shamrock anthology.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about that. Holy shit, that's months away from open submissions.
Yeah, he told me what the theme was going to be this time, and I guess I just sat down and I wrote this story in about 2 hours, and
Oh,
Nice.
sent it to him, and he kind of sat on it a while, and I thought, well, he's not going to read it till people start, he has open submissions, and the other day he said, well, hey, congratulations, you got the first spot, so I'm really happy about it.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, definitely.
That is awesome. I still wish I remembered what I asked 3 people, and I can't remember to ask Todd. But it was something to do with a book that you wish that something fill in the lines, guys. It's like Mad Libs.
You know what? He said he wanted to punch you in the face, so I mean, it's if you want to skip him, I'll understand.
I mean,
what
it's-
thing keeps coming up in his work, whether it's related to religion or not?
Thank you.
That's what it was.
Thank you, sir. John
You
Quick to the rescue.
God, John Quick, man. That's
Random
that guy.
facts, they come up at weird times.
Patrick, I would say I would, punch you in the most loving way possible.
I need photographic proof so I can hang that on my wall.
In that face that he loves.
Yeah.
I'm
So
really confused. When I first meet you in person, I don't know if I'm gonna run away or give you a hug.
I should warn
Well,
you.
running
I'm
away
really
is
tall.
the standard thing when you meet Todd for the first time.
I'm used to that. Usually it's small children that run away, but
Oh,
no, I'm used
no.
to that. No, so question was, what is one thing in my books or my stories that I keep going back to regardless of whether it's got something to do with religion or not?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, I would say that, Mercedes, Ron, and John actually, all their answers, I kind of are applicable. I mean, I tend to write about society in one way or another. I tend to write, about bullying, and I tend to write about racism and bigotry. And, it may not always be apparent, and it may not always translate to the finished product, but, I know when I sit down to write a story, I kind of have an idea of what I'm going for. So, and I'm sorry to keep beating a dead horse, but Devil's Creek comes to mind because, for those who have read it, and this isn't really a spoiler per se, but the town it's based on has a really deplorable history of racism. It's a town I grew up in. So I incorporated that into the story of Devil's Creek because, and I tried to avoid it. I really tried to avoid it. And Mercedes, I'm sure you remember me sending you that chapter because I was nervous as hell to even have included it in the manuscript. And, ultimately it was something I felt strongly about and I needed to say it. And, that's something that I foresee myself revisiting in the future, especially given our current social climate. So, beyond those three things, I mean, I don't know, like monsters. Maybe, certain existential themes, who are you? What are you doing with your life? That sort of thing. The more abstract and existential ideas, I also tend to tackle. It gets kind of hard to explain without going into detail and spoiler territory. So just take my word for it.
That's fair. Brennan.
Just trust you. Yeah.
Yeah, just trust me.
I'm looking at all the stuff that I wanted to make sure we went over tonight. And even though a lot of the questions that I have written down didn't get asked directly, they got answered anyway. Things like, motivation. Why do you write what you write, and how does that tie in? I mean, we've heard pretty much everybody touch on that. So something of a random question, back to our talk on the Bible. I am curious how you feel about incorporating biblical themes, characters, specific stories, and parables into your work. If it's something that you steer away from, if it's something you lean into, or if it's something you're somewhat indifferent toward. John, can we throw it to you first?
It's not something I think that I'm conscious of. I don't avoid it, but I don't go looking for it. I will say I've written a weird Western novella called Damnation Trail, where the main character was the son of a preacher who was the son of a preacher who his family gets killed, and he ends up making a deal with the devil for revenge, knowing full well the impact of what he's done. He doesn't realize it was the devil until it's too late, of course, because that's how we're taught the devil is. He's a trickster. And it actually spawned a sequel where he's trapped, but he's trying to find a way out. What I discovered writing those was a lot of the questions about faith that I was tackling through him. And so that brought in a lot of not necessarily the biblical stories and things, but the teaching methodologies that I had been exposed to growing up about how, doctrine gets taught to you in a church, and the rebelling against that, and then trying to find your way back. I think that's probably the closest I've come to addressing any of it like that. But if the idea came up, I certainly wouldn't shy away from it. And I do know in the sequel, there is an angel watching out for him, and through the character of that angel, I got to kind of play in that world a bit and how to portray him. So it's probably the closest I would come to it.
Kind of explore the themes present through that. That's really interesting. Ron, same question. How do you feel about incorporating different kind of aspects of biblical stories and characters into your work?
I mainly try to distance myself from it when I write horror, but I mean, every now and then it comes through, and I had readers tell me, that they see certain, like symbolism and faith-based stuff in there that maybe I didn't see when I wrote it, that was maybe under the surface. When I wrote Blood Kin, the main vampire is a mountain preacher, who becomes and he comes back from one of his descendants digs him up, and he tries to turn his descendants into a like an unholy congregation, and one of the first one he turns into a vampire is a Baptist preacher. So but the thing is, there were other characters in there that were truly good. You could tell which characters had been like almost like false teachers, and then the protagonists were like, they were imperfect people. They wouldn't, would use per se religious, but they were the heroes of the books. So every now and then, I touch on stuff like in Essential Six stuff. There was Snake Handler, where the preacher comes into town and starts handling snakes, and it turns out he's got more of an agenda than than the congregation thought there was, and there's one in the bunch that knows what's going on because he had seen it when he was a child. He's an old man now, but yeah, I don't consciously explore that a lot of times, but it does come through every now and then.
I like that idea of just kind of exploring almost ingrained ideals. And I really heard that in John's answer, but even then in Snake Handler as well. Todd, I am super interested in your answer because of the one of the stories I know you're working on right now. I don't know how much you can tell us about it, but
I am writing a story right now that is from the perspective of Judas Iscariot. I've been doing a lot of biblical research lately. Oddly enough, it's completely unplanned for this discussion. But yeah, I have been looking into that, and it's fascinating to me because you don't really have a reasoning for Judas's motivations. Why did he do what he does? There's not really a clear answer in the Bible. So that's an opportunity for me to explore that. Why does a guy who is at one point extremely devout and following another man who says he's the Son of God go from being a disciple of his to betraying him that ultimately leads to his death and fulfills what is essentially prophecy? So I can't really go into the story because it's not done and it's committed elsewhere. So anything else I would say about it would constitute a spoiler, and I don't think John Taft would like that very much. So,
He's cool with it, man. We got him on the line.
Said it's fine.
All us bald guys can teleport our thoughts to each other.
As far as like using those elements from religion and faith and what have you in my fiction, I mean, there are pieces of my upbringing in the church that have come through. First comes to mind is my novelette Saving Granny from the Devil, which is semi-autobiographical and paints the devil as an agent of God, essentially. And in that, you have a protagonist who's reliving these memories of himself as a young child, asking these fundamental questions after a day in Sunday school. So, why does the devil tempt Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights? Like, why? You're looking at the nature of the devil, and you start asking why and why and why, and that you start running into those walls of, well, take it on faith. Well, I'm a fiction writer. I'm going to make shit up. So I that comes to mind. I don't shy away from using it. If anything, I think it gives, in the right context, it gives some authority to what I'm talking about, or at least that I have a little concept of what I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure in Devil's Creek I mentioned someone having a night, their own personal night in Gethsemane. And, I tend to go back to that and use that in, almost everyday conversation, because, that to me epitomizes a great struggle of mind. You have Christ in the garden contemplating his own death and asking his Father to take it from him. Please spare me of this. And, he, in the face of silence, he says, well, if that's what you want, then, so be it. But the amount of sheer willpower it would take, someone in that position, like if you or I were to put ourselves in that position, what would you do? Think questions like that. I tend to think about that and how I can incorporate that into fiction, into stories, especially when you take a character's situation and how does that apply. It makes for a good descriptor, good metaphor. Yeah. So, I mean, I do use that stuff in my work, if anything, to give it an extra bit of context. One might say an extra angle of the parable I'm trying to tell. See what I did there?
Well played, sir.
Thank you.
I'm still kind of dwelling on the Judas thing, as I guess I never really thought about it from that angle before. We almost kind of satiate ourselves with saying, "Oh, he did it for money," but you're right. There's got to be more to the story. Even if it's just it is money and there's a certain inner turmoil, or if there's something else that we don't know that drove him to go looking for the money, that extra piece of the story.
Yeah, and he felt so guilty about it, he gave the money back, or tried to. And there's some, discrepancies depending on what book, you're taking it from. But, it is, kind of universally accepted, he tried to get the money back. Whether he was struck down by God or hung himself or, whatnot, that's debatable. But he tried to get the money back. He felt really horrible about it. So, I like to look into things like that don't have clear answers and ask what if. Well, what if Judas was doing the right thing? What if Jesus told him to do it? What if that's not how the story goes, by the way. But there is, going back to the Apocrypha I mentioned in the Gospel of Judas, what's left of it, because it's mostly just tatters, of bits and pieces of pages that were found. There are some translations that scholars argue about all this crap, but, there are certain translations that scholars think that, it's basically Judas's testament of why he did what he did. And that it was because Jesus came to him and explained to him his role in all this. Because without Judas, you don't have Christ getting sold out and, going before the courts and ultimately getting crucified. Christ can't rise and redeem humanity if he doesn't die first, So Judas is kind of like that. He's that catalyst in the story.
There's your story with Mercedes to make both your aunts happy.
Yay!
Yes. No, my aunt's not going to be happy about this one.
Also, I'm glad you didn't spoil it. We were lying. Taff would have been pissed.
Really pissed.
Yeah, he sent a cease and desist right now. Brennan, are you familiar with Jesus Christ Superstar, the musical?
William
in theory, yes.
Okay, because I love it. It makes me cry every time, but it is basically from Judas's point of view. So it's really interesting. I love it. A lot of people find it, sacrilegious or don't like it. It offends a lot of people, but to me, it just is wonderful.
One person's sacrilege is another person's sacrilegious.
No.
Oh boy, sacrilegious. That's going to be our co-edited Christian novel.
Yep. That's our anthology, Mercedes.
You think McKinley will publish it?
Sacrilegious?
Yeah.
If I talk nice to him, he might.
So there was and there still is this game you can get on Google Play called Jesus VR, Jesus Virtual Reality. I know when that first came out, it was getting a lot for the same thing. Like there were a lot of offended people. It's not like a game where it's making fun of religion or nothing. It's supposed to be you living in the life of Christ. Now, beyond that, I don't know what the game entails in the details of the actual plot, but it's not meant to offend people. But I've seen a lot of angry people with things like that. So I don't think
a lot of walking in that game.
Yeah, like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there's a lot of walking.
Okay.
Sorry.
Pat, you didn't do your research properly on that game. You got to be prepared to tell us what it's all about.
Well, I can read the description right now if you'd like.
Sure, that's fine. We can skip that.
I think we should have a group playthrough.
Right.
So, Mercedes, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that the person that uses the Bible the most in his work is Todd. But for me,
wah, wah.
My first thought was, no, I don't use the Bible in my work at all. But when I thought about it, good versus evil. I do tend to write about people giving up their life for somebody else, which is based on Christ, I guess. But I would say most of my work seems to be informed by fairy tales, which are also based on some of the things in the Bible, the more morality, things like that. But yeah, so I guess my innate beliefs come through, and that I believe that if there's like a darkness, you need to fight it. And not, I believe, and I write characters that the big bad is coming, whatever it is, and you need to stand up and fight it. You can't just let it. And the big bad in my stories usually will converse with you, like, Satan's usually conversing with Christ, or, the demons and the bad people in the Bible are always quite mouthy. They're never like, I'm going to silently do things. They're usually like, ah, ha, 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 and so maybe that comes through, and that personal one-on-one with it. But that's probably it. Just my beliefs shining through. Maybe a little bit of my word usage, because I grew up reading scriptures, and so I'll say things that just come from the Bible, turns of phrase people will point out are strange, and I'm like, whatever, leave me alone, man. I'm a writer. But that's it.
So you write like, instead of like this object is several feet away, it's several cubits away.
It's several. I'm offended we didn't begin this meeting with
right?
prayer.
Well, we can't exactly hold hands, Mercedes.
We don't do that. That's weird, Todd. My friend's weird and creepy dad would have family prayer, and he'd make everyone hold hands, and he always sat by me when I was over for sleepovers and would hold my hand, and it just skeeved me out.
Did he have really sweaty hands?
Yes, he did. He was also a junior high.
How would you describe his hands, Mercedes?
High teacher. Sweaty and chubby and
moist.
Uh-oh, Christian Bale's back.
His hands were a bit damp.
It was creepy. No one wants to hold hands with their teacher.
No.
Yeah.
Not even Batman. I can't do it. Go ahead.
Batman might. Batman always wears gloves for a reason.
Because of Robin. I don't know what that meant. I was hoping someone would fill in the blank.
I have weird sweaty hands.
Well, now you've roasted me out. I'm so skeeved. Thanks a lot.
Whose turn is it?
We're all done. New question.
It's your turn. It's your turn, Pat.
Not a guest.
We all answered it.
Okay. So, I'd like to know, and I'm sure other people would like to know, what are you currently working on? What works can you discuss? Todd, we want you to talk about Taft's project.
Yeah, I want to know the end right now.
Nope, can't do that. Sorry. Other than the undisclosed project I'm working on, I'm also about 50,000 words into a novel I started writing for NaNoWriMo. I can't keep up with John Quick, unfortunately.
I was going to bring that up.
He's a machine. But I did manage around 2,000 to 2,500 words on average a day. So I hit 53,000 by the end of November. Book's not done. It's called Spiders in the Lattice. It's kind of all over the place currently in first draft form, but if I had to sum it up, I'd call it an apocalyptic Lovecraftian love story.
Ooh.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of John Quick, I listen to a lot of podcasts. One of them is the Mondo Method with Armand Rosamalia. And you know where I'm going with this. For those that don't listen to it, I'd check it out. It's a fun show. They talk about you a lot. I think they like you, man, because they just don't stop bragging about your ability to do what Todd just said. You are the master at NaNoWriMo.
They're not picking on John. They're picking on me.
I got beat this year. Somebody had it in 13 days. It took me 16.
Holy shit.
Was it Tim Meyer?
No. In fact, what made me over 50,000, I was telling my wife, I was like, yeah, Tim Meyer's going to hit it like in a day or two. She's like, well, you can't let him do that. You've got to do it first.
That's a good wife.
Really? So I sat down and wrote for about 6 hours and hit the 50,000. I was like, there, are you happy now?
In 16 days, you hit 50,000 words.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no wonder why you brought up all the time, man. Jeez, Louise. Okay.
21. Shut up, John. It was a short story, okay?
I did it once last
Short
year.
story. What was it?
days.
200,000 words for a short?
That's a piece of flash fiction for me.
Oh, that's flash fiction. Okay, I'm sorry.
So, John, what's new that you can discuss that is on the horizon or recently released?
On the horizon, I had a limited hardcover come out through Thunderstorm called Crimson Springs. Came out during the summer. It was my first attempt at cosmic horror. That is going to be coming out through Bloodshot Books shortly after the first of the year. I don't have an exact date yet. For everyone who loved Lyd Hanson's work on the limited edition cover, that she's doing the paperback cover as well.
Dude,
So,
she's
nice.
awesome.
I love Lynn to death. She's great.
Oh yeah, she is awesome.
Her cover on the new Weird Tales issue is just stellar.
Yes. But that's the next thing I've got coming out. I've got a couple of things in the pipeline for next year that I can't talk about yet. And as far as what I'm working on now, I'm kind of in the same boat Todd is. I did not finish that book during November. I ended up having to take about a week off at the beginning of this month, or a few days, whatever it was, to work on some edits that I had due, and I'm now getting back into that to finish it. It started as a reimagining of the first original novel I ever finished that no one will ever get to read as long as I am alive and have anything to say about it.
All right, so we have to kill you.
Hey, you got to deal with Wiley Young after I'm dead. He's the one handling my literary estate, and he has very explicit instructions not to let this out either.
What if he gets killed?
So we're gonna have to steal it.
Then it would be on my wife, and
oh no, we're not gonna joke about that.
I was gonna. That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's not okay.
But I kind of took the story I had and modified it, where it was a guy goes back to the small town he grew up in South Alabama. His father was very abusive, and he had left home, and he goes back for his father's burial, and discovers his dad had realized there was what looked like a Wendigo in South Alabama, where one isn't supposed to be, according to Native American legend.
Nice. That sounds awesome.
Well, what it turned out that I've discovered, my dad passed in 2015, or no, 2005. It's 15 years. Apparently, I wasn't as over it as I thought, because the first 80,000 words of this has been the main character going through dealing with burying his father and all the emotions and things that are coming up through that. And there were times where I was like, wow, okay, April 2nd, 2005, it is not that day, but it feels like that day. Yeah. So now I'm actually getting into the part where there's a Wendigo or whatever it is.
That's awesome, man. Ron, you, sir.
Well, after a couple of years of procrastinating, 2020's pretty much kicked me in the seat of the pants and maybe do something. And I've had 3 books come out in the last 3 months. So, I've had the Central 6 stuff, the Halloween store, and now I've got the Seasons Creepings is out. And, I'm really getting, back into writing the short stories a lot. And I'm working on right now I'm working on a Irish Gothic. It's called Irish Gothic Tales of Celtic Horror, and I'm kind of delving into my ancestry and my love for Irish folklore, and that's going to be like 8 stories, another small collection. Zach McCain's doing another great cover for it, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I'll be working on the sequel to Fear, which is called Fear Eternal. And then I'm going to be doing a 5-volume horror western serial for Thunderstorm over the next 3 years. It was an idea I had back in 1992 that I pitched to Berkeley, and they were interested, but they didn't pick it up. So with the resurgence of interest in horror westerns, I thought it was a good time to dust it off and see what I could do with it. So that'll be called Dead Eye, and we'll have 5 volumes of that over the next 3 years, and so I've got a lot of work ahead of me. So,
and Rod, you do recently you've done a lot of work with Crossroad Press, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. They put out all my ebooks and audiobooks, and lately they've been doing a lot of paperbacks. So, and they're good to work with, and they're fast to work with. I only had the idea to do the Halloween store in August, and we got it out in October. So,
wow.
So that's it's pretty fast.
Wow. Yeah, that's like self-published fast.
Yeah,
it is.
Now, there. Anyone answer this, please? But is that the press? Isn't that the press that's coming out with the reissued version of Layman's A Writer's Tale?
I believe it is.
I don't know.
I think so, but I can't remember for sure.
I was hoping someone knew because I thought I swear that couldn't remember if it was another press, but
Patrick, we are not Google, okay?
all right. I got Google. I should have just asked Google. My bad. Mercedes, your turn.
Yeah, so I just edited an anthology that dropped in the middle of the pandemic called Arterial Bloom that Todd has a story in and did the cover for. So that was a huge deal for me because that took a really, really long time, a lot of work. And what I'm excited that's coming out next is we're doing a graphic novel of Pretty Little Dead Girls, a novel of murder and whimsy. We're doing a graphic novel and we're doing it in 3 parts. And the first part will be coming out very soon. It was supposed to be out by now, but COVID kind of threw a wrench in everything. So
yeah,
it's a little bit later, but it's so good. Orion Zangara is doing the art for that, and it's just gorgeous. So
Yeah.
And I'm working on a novel that I've been wanting. I put off for years to do my commitments, and I'm working on it. And I got super stuck. Right now it's called Breathe a Burning, and it's about basically a town that cannibalizes itself, which seems to be one of my themes. But I couldn't figure out, I got myself stuck in it and couldn't figure it out. And last night at about 3:30 in the morning, I was texting myself notes about it because I don't sleep. And I figured it out. I figured out how I wanted it to end. And I went, and my husband was like, I go back to sleep. But I figured it out. And I'm so excited in fact, after dinner tonight, I'm going to get started on it and wind that thing up. And I'm also trying my hand at one of my very few sci-fi short stories. I was invited to something, and I don't do a lot of sci-fi, but I'm really intrigued, and so I'm working on one right now, and that's super cool. It feels good to kind of stretch my wings in a different genre, because horror and fantasy is and I do a lot of magical surrealism, so it's like, oh, that just happened, that's how it is. And sci-fi has rules and clockwork and things that have to be specific, so that's different for me, so that's cool.
Now, is there anything that anyone here wants to mention that because we're wrapping up now, so I don't want to just say we're done. Is there anything that anyone wants to talk about, mention, suggest, throw out there for people that they should read? Anything? The floor is yours. I'll take that as a no.
Nobody wants the floor, man.
Okay. The floor is bad. Where can
the floor is lava?
I've heard it's lava, yeah.
Yeah.
Where can people follow you? Mercedes.
I'm on Facebook, Mercedes Murdoch Yardley. Don't go to my author's page. I never check it out. I'm on Twitter at MercedesMY, and my blog is mercedesmyardley.com. So I'm very active online.
Very good. Ronald Kelly, where can people follow you?
RonaldKelly.com. My blog is Southern Fried and Horrified, and
I love that.
You can catch me on Facebook, Twitter at Darky Dixie. Now it's Ronald Kelly 4. Instagram is at Dixie Darkin. So I'm all over. Just look for me and you'll find me.
John Quick.
I've got a website, johnquickfiction.com. I am on Facebook. Kind of like Mercedes said, I've got an author's page, but don't bother because I think I've updated it last about 9 months ago. I'm also on Twitter at John D. Quick.
Todd.
John, real quick, is it quick fiction?
No.
Sorry, that was a stupid joke. Hi, I'm Todd Keisling. My website is toddkeisling.com. Yeah, I'm on Twitter as well, Todd_Keisling. That's usually where I'm most active. Like everybody else has said, don't bother with Facebook. It sucks anyway.
Yeah, take that, Zucker.
I am on Instagram as well, at Todd Keisling, all one word. And I'm also on Patreon, patreon.com/Todd Keisling. So check it out.
This has been really fun. This really set the stage for if Brennan and I want to come back to a roundtable discussion in the future. And I think it's safe to say we do. This is it's been a lot of information and educational things that you guys threw at us. So I appreciate it. So thank you so much for joining us.
This is a pleasure.
Oh, yeah, it
this
was
was
awesome.
great.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We want to have all four of you back on, probably individually. Who knows? Could be a tag team of 2 or 3 of you, or 4. You never know. Brennan, as always, thank you for joining me. It's been a blast. And so this will be out December 14th. That is this upcoming Monday. Followed by that, we will be talking to S.A. Cosby on the 17th. Followed by that will be the very last episode. So stick around. Let us know what you think about this and follow everyone that was on here today. Listeners, thank you for joining us as always. All right. Thank you, guys.